Can I give you some advice? You know what you did wrong there? If it were me, let me tell you what I would have done. It's so easy for others to critique us. Today's show is episode 179, Are You Coachable? Stay tuned and let's discuss. I was an engineer and in 2008 lost my job due to the economic collapse. Jobs were scarce. I didn't know where to turn to get help updating my resume. Online services and coaches charge hundreds, even thousands of dollars. I took matters into my own hands and learned how to craft interview-winning resumes. Shortly later, I landed a job with a Fortune 500 company. I've helped many achieve similar success. Now I share my tips to create interview-winning resumes, interviewing excellence, and high-performance growth strategies on my podcast, Career Growth Made Easy. Welcome back to the Career Growth Made Easy podcast. I'm your host, Craig Ansell. We're going to be exploring coaching today. More specifically, are you coachable? Yes, I'm talking to you on the other side of this microphone. It's hurtful sometimes when we get advice that we weren't expecting. You know what I would have done? Hey, why did you do it that way? Well, I hope you're going to learn from your mistakes. Wow. It's easy being on the criticizing side of you. But what happens when you're the one receiving the criticism? What happens when you're the one that has to process it and react to it? That's partly what today's show is about. Asking, are you coachable? To be coachable, we need to be aware of our emotional intelligence, our ability to communicate well. And with that said, it's not just about the ability to communicate outwardly through spoken language, written, potentially body language, but it's also with the ability to receive feedback, to listen with the intent to understand versus with the intent to respond. It's with our abilities to process the information we receive, that's where we can find ourselves challenged to be coachable. Like I mentioned earlier, getting feedback is one thing, but applying it positively is another. I feel it's about having the right mindset. And in order to do so, one of the famous quotes out there is having the end in mind. When we're going through our lives, maybe starting our jobs, starting our careers, or we got a few years under our belt, we should have our next steps in mind, our approach to what's next in life for us, both personally and professionally. With that said, what do you think about having the end in mind? Now, if you're any kind of sports enthusiast or you've played, maybe you have the idea of mile markers if you're a runner. If you do marathons, whether it's quarter, halves, full, whatever it may be, yes, we have the end in mind, crossing that finish line. But also, before you get that far out, what's your next step? Well, one foot in front of the other, small steps that you can achieve. Then comes mile marker 1, 2, 3, and so on. And I think that's part of having the right mindset as well, breaking things down into bite-sized pieces that we can digest, that we can attack and conquer. Also, to have that mindset, that roadmap, you can't get somewhere if you don't have a plan, if you don't have a map. I'd like to say that coaching can be likened to GPS when you're traveling to a destination. Before GPS, I had no idea what any of us did. How could we get from one place to another, especially a new place that we're traveling to for work or potentially for vacation? I'm a little bit older, a little bit more experienced, you might say. I actually remember the days of paper maps, the ones that were folded into so many complex folds that you store them in your map box, your glove box, and then once you pulled them out, you could almost never put them back the same way they came. It's almost like origami for me, right? There's no way I'm going to be able to build that figure or that object with just a piece of paper, folding it in all those special patterns and sequences. So, talking about maps, more specifically GPS. I had to go on a trip with my son the other day. It was part of our hometown, Central Orlando. And I plugged in the address to where we were going because I'd not been there before. And the GPS said, turn left, turn right, in a few feet, do this. That's fine. But guess what? After another turn, I was smack dab facing a high security fence at the Orlando International Airport. I stopped for obvious reasons. But you know what the GPS wanted me to do? Keep going. Proceed forward. That's not going to work. I'm pretty sure if I broke down a high security fence at the Orlando airport, I'd be on the 5 o'clock news. Yes, GPS, apps, engineers, programmers, software, it is not infallible. Mistakes can be made, and this was a perfect example. Maybe the software wasn't updated to show that a new runway or new pathway on the airport was there. I don't know. Maybe extra fencing was added since COVID. Who knows? But nonetheless, sometimes we can't trust our GPS. The point being, we might have the right mindset. We might have even an end in mind, like I mentioned earlier with the example of runners and looking at mile markers and eventually crossing the finish line. But sometimes there's an accident. Sometimes there's road construction. And in my case, simply the wrong directions. We might need to be rerouted. Sometimes that can happen automatically. Like I mentioned, with accidents and road construction, you'll see your GPS app turn yellow or red, indicating slow or stop traffic, and there might be alternate ways to get to where you're going. You might need to go a farther distance than expected, but it's going to get you there faster than the original route just because of the delays in traffic. So the point, if we change our plans, we still may get to the end destination. It's still our target. It just may not be the exact way we're going to get there. So thinking about coaching, first of all, today's show title, Are You Coachable? If you're saying, shrugging your shoulders, saying, yeah, Craig, sure I am. Okay, think about that honestly. When's the last time you received advice of any kind? When's the last time you received criticism, whether it be positive or negative? Then there's that all too familiar phrase out there, you should give constructive criticism. What exactly is that? Well, it's not just someone's opinion or feedback on a situation as to how you performed, but it's also a way for them to potentially uplift you, constructively build you up. You know, I noticed that you struggled in this situation the other day, Craig. I used to struggle like that too, and then I started applying this new process, and I found that I have less difficulty achieving my goals. So it's really about the conversation you're having to be coachable. Are you open? Are you willing? Are you accepting of feedback? Sometimes that feedback may come requested. In the case where I'll go and speak to peers, I'll speak to my leadership and ask for those tough conversations to see what they think. Other times it will come unsolicited. And this may have happened to you, and it might actually happen more frequently than the other. So that's where our emotional intelligence comes in. Are we willing and able, through verbal communication, through written, as well as our body language, able to accept that constructive criticism, or hopefully constructive criticism, and make it a coachable moment? That's where that emotional intelligence, having that maturity, that wisdom, the knowledge to know that there's power in silence, power in pauses. I have a show that I captured earlier on, and I'll see through the power of podcasting if I can pause for a moment and find that number for you before the show's over. And it was called Craig's Powerfully Placed Pauses, my 3P rule. And I'll tell you, pauses, silence can really be helpful in a number of situations. For most of us, though, I'll tell you, it makes us feel uncomfortable. I happen to be a reader at one of our local churches, Saints Peter and Paul. And I have the opportunity this coming weekend to read one of our Bible passages. When I get up on the ambo, which is an elevated platform overlooking the congregation, there may be hundreds and sometimes as much as 1,000 people there. Typically, you'll see that during the holiday masses and special church events. The point, though, is when I'm up there speaking, a brief pause in front of hundreds or even 1,000 people or more can seem like a lifetime. Imagine doing that just one-on-one with one of your peers, or in what might feel like a more pressured situation with your supervision or your management, either on a one-on-one conversation in the hallway or during your performance reviews. That's really where that silence and those pauses can come in handy. There's more to it than just taking that pause, but there's thinking before you speak, digesting the conversation, and moving forward from that point. That is part of what I believe helps make you coachable. Have you ever responded quickly back to someone when they've given you feedback or advice, whether you asked for it or it was unsolicited? How quickly did you respond? What words did you choose? Some of the ones I've heard around the office, yeah, I know. No, me too. Yeah, I'll try that next time. No, I see what you're saying. Those might be words you've used or that you've heard, or you have your own favorites, your quick responders, if you will, that you go to. The key point about today's show, though, we should try, if you agree, to pause before responding and digest the feedback that we're provided. Maybe the GPS is right. We will get to our destination, but it might take some rerouting on our part. It might take longer than planned to get to your goal or one of your milestones, like a mile marker with running. It doesn't matter how you get there. It just matters that you get there when you have a plan, something in mind, an end goal, right? A vision. And when you're early on in your career, this doesn't have to be some grand vision. I'm going to be a millionaire by the time I'm 30 or 40 or 50 or whatever the case is. I'm going to own a multi-million-dollar company. Yeah, it's great to have plans. It's great to have vision. It's great to have hope. I agree with all that. But you don't have to extend it out so far if you're starting out early in your career or you just have a few years' experience. Small steps, those bite-sized steps I talk about that are the most valuable. It's the old saying, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time, meaning give yourself bite-sized, actionable pieces. And by the way, thank you for listening to my show today, Career Growth Made Easy. We're blessed and proud to be able to offer you nearly 180 episodes of your choosing. Now, if you're in a situation where you're not sure what your next steps are, maybe you're frustrated at work or disappointed with how things are going with regards to your pay, your performance reviews, or maybe you don't have performance reviews at your job and that frustrates you in itself, not getting feedback, I'd be honored to work with you and help you. I have a specific coaching program called Discovery Coaching that I can work with you one-on-one virtually and help you go through your situation, unravel it, and give you some key crystal clear, actionable steps so that you can move forward and remove some of that ambiguity, some of that unknown from your life with regards to your career. Back, though, to coaching. Are you coachable? It is all in your mindset. You may not always want to be coached. Sometimes we have to dig deep down inside and go to that humble place to receive what may feel like harsh criticism. We need to be able to hear it, absorb it, process, then respond or react to it. Instant reactions usually don't go well. And I don't know if you know this, but that comes from the fight or flight reflex, that emotional side of our brain. We have a choice to make when it comes to digesting information. The information in our brains can take the short trip to the emotional side, that fight or flight response, or we can just pause for a moment and let that information take the longer route to the back of the brain where it can be analyzed. It can be data, it can be analytical, and that gives you the time to respond more professionally, more maturely, with a little bit of knowledge and wisdom. So the next time you have an opportunity to have a conversation with someone and potentially feedback comes back, potentially negative or harsh feedback, hopefully it's constructive, like I say, but take that pause from today's show, asking yourself, are you coachable? And try different ways to respond to those situations to see how the feedback goes during the rest of the conversation. The more that we learn to process information by taking pauses and digesting that content, the better that you and I will be intelligently responding to our situations, especially when we receive unsolicited feedback, and hopefully with that feedback, it's constructive, criticism, constructive feedback. If you're interested in learning more about my potential coaching options, please look at craigancel.com. That's CRAIGANCEL.com. I have a number of different programs to choose from. The calendar appointment times are all listed for your flexibility. Thank you so much for being a valuable listener to the Career Growth Made Easy podcast. We're proud to be approaching 180 episodes for your listening pleasure. Have a wonderful day ahead. We're always looking forward to reviews on Apple, Spotify, and other players. Please leave your comments and feedback. We can't thank you enough. That will help us grow. Oh, and by the way, I just remembered. I owed you looking up at least one episode that I mentioned earlier. The first episode is episode 51. 3 P's, Craig's powerfully placed pauses. I think you'll like it. But then also, I found another one that was relatively recent, 172. That's learning from your mistakes. I think both shows will complement today's. You'd enjoy them. Have a great time. Episode 51 and 172. I will talk to you next week. You've been listening to Craig Ansell and the Career Growth Made Easy podcast. Thanks for watching. If you've enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe to our channel. New episodes every Monday. In the meantime, why don't you follow us on social media at Craig Ansell on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram. To book a coaching appointment, download our free guides, or join our email list, check out the links in the description below.